I stood on my parents' front step on Christmas Eve, my hand hovering just short of the doorbell, long enough for the familiar weight to settle in my chest. I had worn my plain wool coat on purpose, the one with the frayed lining. I wanted no misunderstandings tonight. Inside this house, appearances had always been translated into value. Before I knocked, let me say this clearly. The story in the video is a creative work by Family Afterlight. All characters and events are fictional, crafted to convey a humanistic message and the values of family. The door opened before I touched the bell. "Karis," my mother said, already stepping back. No hug, no pause. Just space cleared so I could enter. "You're just in time. We were starting without you." The living room was full. Laughter cut off the moment I crossed the threshold, like someone lowering the volume on a radio. My father glanced up from his chair and nodded once. "Good. You made it." That was all. My sister Tamsin stood near the fireplace, glass of wine in hand, surrounded by relatives who leaned toward her without realizing it. She looked polished, confident, exactly as everyone expected her to look. "Oh," she said, noticing me last. "I didn't think you'd come." "I said I would," I replied. She smiled, the polite version. "Right. Well, coat goes there." I hung it up myself. Aunt Ruth approached, her voice already softened. "Karis." "Sweetheart, your mother tells me you're still at that little bookstore." "It's a community space," I said. "That's nice," she replied quickly. "Staying busy is important." Across the room, my father was already speaking again. Tamsin just finished her final review with the board. They're very pleased. "They should be," my mother added. "She's worked so hard." Tamsin laughed lightly. "It's just momentum. That's what success looks like," my father said, raising his glass toward her. Then, without looking at me, he added, "Some people find their path early." The sentence ended there. It did not need a second half. I moved toward the edge of the room, close enough to hear, far enough not to interrupt. That had always been my place. Conversations flowed around me, not through me. Susan Carter leaned in and asked my mother. "Not me. Is Karis still downtown?" "Yes," my mother said. "In that small apartment, near her work." Susan nodded sympathetically. "That area hasn't changed much." "Neither, I thought, had this room." Tamsin finally turned to me again. "So," she said, her tone careful, "how are things?" "Fine," I said. She waited, as if expecting more. "That's good," she said when I didn't continue. "Stability matters." My father set his glass down with a soft clink. "Dinner will be ready soon. We should all sit together." Together, in this house, had always meant something very specific. As I took my seat at the far end of the table, I became aware of the familiar sensation that used to follow me everywhere. Here, the sense that my presence was tolerated, but never required. If this story resonates with you so far, if you recognize this kind of silence, stay with me. What happened next did not begin loudly. It began the way it always had in this family, with a smile that did not reach the eyes. Dinner was served with the kind of ceremony reserved for achievements, not holidays. My mother placed the dishes carefully, as if presentation itself were proof of intention. My father waited until everyone was seated before he spoke again. "So," he said, folding his hands, "Tamsin's team finalized the expansion numbers this morning." Tamsin smiled without looking at me. "They exceeded projections." "Of course they did," my mother said. "You don't miss details." A cousin leaned forward. "Is it true the firm might double its footprint next year?" Tamsin nodded. "If everything holds?" "Yes. The board is already discussing leadership alignment." My father's voice softened in a way it never had for me. That's what happens when someone takes responsibility seriously. Across the table, Susan Carter glanced at me, then back at my mother. "And Karis is still downtown." "Yes," my mother said. She likes it there. I spoke before she could add more. I do. Susan smiled. Surprised I had answered? That's good. Some people aren't built for pressure. My fork paused mid-air. Tamsin didn't look up, but I saw the corner of her mouth tighten. You always preferred simple things, my father said, as if explaining me to the room. That's not a flaw. It's just different. Tamsin finally turned toward me. We all find our lanes. I like mine, I said. She held my gaze for a moment, measuring. That's what matters. The conversation moved on without me. They discussed housing markets, long-term planning, children. Someone mentioned private schools. Another person brought up stock options. Each topic landed neatly in Tamsin's world and stopped there. My mother gestured toward me with her glass. Karis has always marched to her own rhythm. It sounded affectionate until she added, We just worry she doesn't hear the tempo changing. I hear it, I said quietly. My father frowned slightly, as if I had interrupted something important. Hearing isn't the same as understanding. Tamsin set her napkin down. Dad, it's fine. No, he said. It's family. We should be honest. Honest, in this house, had always meant unchallenged. You're in your early 30s, he continued, looking directly at me now, and you're still exploring. I'm working, I said. Yes, my mother said quickly, and that's respectable. But stability comes from growth. Tamsin leaned back in her chair. Not everyone wants the same kind of growth. The room went quiet. It was the closest she had ever come to defending me. My father cleared his throat. Ambition looks different on different people. He raised his glass again, this time higher. But let's acknowledge achievement where it exists. Everyone followed his lead. Tamsin accepted the attention with practiced ease. I lowered my eyes to my plate, not in shame, but in recognition. In this family, success was a language. Tonight, I was fluent in silence. Dessert hadn't arrived yet, but the tone had already shifted. My mother stood and began collecting plates, moving with purpose, the way she did when she believed something important was about to happen. Aunt Ruth helped me put something together, she said, not looking at me. Just ideas. Tamsin straightened in her chair. We all did. My father nodded. As a family. That word again. Family. It landed like a decision already made. Susan leaned toward me, her voice lowered, almost tender. We've noticed you've been keeping to yourself more. I work a lot, I said. At the bookstore, she replied, smiling as if clarifying a misunderstanding. Which is fine, but isolation isn't healthy long-term. I'm not isolated, I said. My father folded his arms. You don't socialize much. You don't network. You don't plan. I plan, I said, just not out loud. Tamsin finally met my eyes. This isn't an attack. Karis, it feels like one, I said. She inhaled, steadying herself. We're worried. That's all. Worried was the word they always used when they wanted compliance. My mother returned to the table and placed a hand on the back of my chair. You've always been sensitive. I stiffened but didn't move away. And independent, she continued. But independence can turn into avoidance. My father leaned forward. You're not behind because you lack ability. You're behind because you refuse structure. I didn't ask to be measured, I said. He raised his eyebrows. Life measures you whether you agree or not. Across the table, Uncle Walter cleared his throat. When I was your age, I already knew where I was headed, Tamsin added gently, and I didn't get there alone. The implication hung there, neat and polished. My mother picked up a small folder from the sideboard and set it on the table in front of me. We just want to help you take the next step. I looked at it but didn't open it. What's inside? I asked. Options, she said. Guidance. Deadlines, my father added. Accountability. Susan smiled. A starting point. I finally opened the folder. Budget worksheets. Entry-level job listings. Notes in my mother's handwriting. Tamsin leaned in. I thought it might help to see things laid out. You planned this, I said. My father didn't deny it. We talked. Without me. You don't always know what's best for yourself, my mother said softly. Something in my chest tightened, not anger. Recognition. Tamsin's voice lowered. This isn't about control. It is. I said. You just don't call it that. Silence stretched across the table. Not the awkward kind. The confirming kind. My father stood. Let's pause. Dinner has been emotional. I closed the folder and placed it back where it had been. Emotion wasn't what filled the room. It was certainty. After dessert, my father tapped his glass lightly with the back of his fork. The sound cut through the low conversations like a signal. Everyone looked up at once. Before we finish the night, he said, there are a few things we want to acknowledge. Tamsin's posture shifted immediately. She had been trained to recognize moments like this. My mother smiled and reached for a narrow box wrapped in dark paper. This is for you, she said to Tamsin. We're very proud. Tamsin accepted it with practiced grace. Inside was a framed plaque, engraved with her name and title. Applause followed, warm and effortless. Someone opened a bottle of champagne. My father poured generously. To leadership, he said. To vision. My mother added. Tamsin lifted her glass. I couldn't have done it without support. Everyone nodded, satisfied. Then my mother turned toward me. And this, she said, lifting a large gift bag from beside the sideboard, is for you. Karis. The room quieted, not in anticipation, in observation. I stood and took the bag. It was heavier than I expected. We thought long and hard about what would actually help, Susan said, her voice bright. Something practical. I reached inside and pulled out a stack of papers. Budget worksheets, carefully organized, color-coded. My father leaned back in his chair. It's important to understand cash flow. I pulled out the next item. Job applications, administrative roles, entry level. The kind of work that asked for availability, not ambition. There's no shame in starting small, Uncle Walter said. Structure builds confidence. My mother stepped closer. We also outlined a timeline, just to keep things moving. I found her handwritten notes at the bottom of the bag. Monthly goals, suggested interviews, a reminder to check in weekly. You did all this, I said. As a family, my father replied. Tamsin rose from her seat. I actually wanted to add something. She took a breath, then smiled in a way that suggested generosity rather than equality. My new role allows me to bring on an assistant. The room leaned in. It's a demanding position, she continued, but it would give you exposure, discipline, a real routine, and the compensation my father asked, already approving. Tamsin waved it off lightly. It wouldn't be much, around $40,000 a year. But it's stable. My mother clasped her hands together. That's incredibly generous. Susan nodded. A chance to learn from someone successful. Tamsin looked at me now, fully. You wouldn't have to worry so much anymore? About what I asked. She hesitated. About drifting. The word settled heavily between us. My father cleared his throat. You could move back home. Save money. And help with things, my mother added quickly. Meals, errands, family supports, family, Uncle Walter said. I placed the papers back into the bag, one by one, carefully. You planned my life. I said. We planned your recovery, my mother corrected. From what I asked. Silence followed. Not uncertainty. Agreement. Tamsin's voice softened. You don't have to decide tonight. My father shook his head. Actually, she should. I lifted the bag and set it gently on the table. This isn't help, I said. It's a boundary you're drawing around me. My mother's smile faltered. You're being emotional. No, I said. You're being precise. No one spoke after that. The champagne bubbled quietly in raised glasses, still waiting to be celebrated. The conversation didn't end after the bag was set down. It narrowed. My father remained standing, hands braced on the back of his chair. Let's be clear, he said. No one is attacking you. That's not how this feels. I replied. Feelings aren't the point, he said. Outcomes are. Tamsin glanced at him, then back to me. This doesn't have to be humiliating. It already is, I said. She exhaled slowly. I'm trying to offer you something real. Real control, I said. My mother stepped in quickly. You're misinterpreting generosity. I'm reading the terms, I said. They're very clear. Tamsin folded her hands together. Professional now. If you worked with me, I could make sure you're taken care of. Taken care of how I asked? She hesitated. You wouldn't have to worry about decisions anymore. The room shifted. My father nodded once, approving. That structure, he said. You've lacked it. I've lived alone for over a decade. I said. I manage my own work. My mother shook her head gently. You survive. You don't build. Tamsin leaned forward. This is a chance to be part of something larger than yourself. I already am, I said. Susan laughed lightly, the sound brittle. That's optimism talking. My father's voice hardened. You're in your early 30s with no measurable trajectory. Measured by who I said? By reality, he answered. Tamsin's tone softened again. You could move back home. It would be temporary. How temporary, I asked. She looked to my mother. As long as it takes, my mother said. And if I don't want that, I said. Silence. My father answered instead. Then you're choosing instability, Tamsin added, almost kindly. We can't keep watching you drift. There it is, I said. My mother frowned. What? The word you keep using, I said. Drift. As if I'm not anchored to anything. Tamsin straightened, irritation flickering across her face. You don't have to be defensive. I do, I said. You're deciding my worth. She opened her mouth, then closed it. My father ended the discussion. This is the last time we're having this conversation. I stood and picked up my coat. Actually, I said, it's the first time you've said it out loud. No one followed me to the door. As I stepped into the cold night, I understood something with complete clarity. They didn't want me to fail. They wanted me contained. I returned to the dining room after a few minutes, long enough for the air to settle. They were already talking again, as if my absence had given them permission to reset the night. Tamsin was standing near the table, phone in hand. They confirmed the meeting, she said, her voice tight with relief. December 26th, 2 p.m. My father straightened immediately. That's soon. It has to be. Tamsin replied. The board is watching this closely. My mother turned toward her. This partnership could stabilize everything. It could do more than that, Tamsin said. It could save positions. Susan leaned forward. This is the firm you mentioned earlier. Yes, Tamsin said. Aegis Meridian. The name landed differently than mine ever had. People leaned in. I've heard of them, Uncle Walter said. Private. Very selective. Ethics-driven, Susan added. They're known for declining deals quietly. My father nodded. That kind of discipline usually means strong leadership. Tamsin smiled, encouraged. They're valued at around $380 million. Annual revenue is estimated at over $120 million. My mother exhaled. That's serious. They operate in 10 states, Tamsin continued. Mostly compliance and data security for large institutions. Susan's eyes widened. And they're considering your firm? They already are, Tamsin said. But this meeting matters. My father's voice lowered. How much does this deal affect your forecast? Tamsin didn't hesitate. If it doesn't move forward, we'll have to restructure. Possibly reduce staff. Silence followed. This was different. This wasn't applause. This was pressure. They're known for their values, Susan said. Community investment. Internal accountability. That's what drew me to them. Tamsin replied. Their founder is completely anonymous. No public image. No ego. My father smiled. That's rare. Intentional, Tamsin said. They evaluate culture as much as performance. My mother nodded approvingly. That's how businesses should be run. I remained still, my hands folded in my lap. Susan glanced toward me briefly, then back to Tamsin. Where is their office here? Tamsin said, scrolling. Downtown. North River Street. My father frowned slightly. That's near where Karis works. Yes, Tamsin said. Actually, the address is the same building. My mother looked at me for the first time in several minutes. That's convenient. It is, Tamsin said. They use the lower floor for community-facing operations. Susan laughed softly. Even billion-dollar ethics firms have storefronts now. My father raised his glass again. To partners who understand responsibility, to leadership that sets standards, my mother added. Tamsin lifted her glass last. This meeting could change everything. Their glasses touched lightly in the center of the table. I did not raise mine. They admired the company because it reflected what they believed mattered. They did not realize they were describing the life they had never bothered to look at. They arrived early. I watched from behind the front counter as my family gathered outside the bookstore windows. Coats pressed, posture formal, voices low. Tamsin checked her phone twice before stepping inside. This is it, she said, scanning the room. I expected something more corporate. It's intentional, my father replied. Ethics firms like understatement. My mother smiled politely at me. You opened early. I always do, I said. Susan looked around. It's charming, community-oriented. That's the point, Tamsin said. Aegis Meridian values visibility without spectacle. My father checked his watch. We should be ready when they arrive. They already are, I said. Tamsin turned. What do you mean I walked past them toward the back of the store? This way. She hesitated, then followed. The others trailed behind, curiosity overtaking caution. At the end of the hallway, I stopped in front of the private elevator. I pressed my access card against the panel. The doors slid open quietly. Susan frowned. I didn't know this was here. It isn't advertised, I said. The ride-up was silent. No one spoke. When the doors opened, the space beyond was clean and spare. Screens lined one wall. A long table sat at the center. My father stepped out slowly. This is impressive. Tamsin's voice lowered. This must be their executive floor. I moved to the head of the table and placed my tote down. I didn't sit yet. They're very particular about meetings, Tamsin said, still performing. They value punctuality. I know, I said. She looked at me then. Truly looked. Karis. I met her gaze. Please sit. They did. One by one. My father hesitated before taking a seat. This is unusual, he said. Yes, I replied. Tamsin straightened. We should wait for them. I reached into my tote and slid a folder across the table. It stopped in front of her. She didn't touch it. What is this corporate records? I said, incorporation filings. Board minutes. My father leaned forward. Why are you handling this because it's my responsibility? I said. Tamsin opened the folder. Her expression shifted slowly, like a system recalibrating. That's not possible, she said. I sat down. I founded Aegis Meridian 7 years ago. I said, I serve as its chief executive. Silence followed. Not confusion. Not disbelief. Something heavier, Susan whispered. Karis. My father stood abruptly. This isn't appropriate. It's accurate, I said. Tamsin pushed the folder away as if it burned. You work at a bookstore. I own the building, I said, and the company upstairs. My mother's voice trembled. Why would you let us believe I didn't correct assumptions? I said. I observed them. Tamsin shook her head slowly. You let this happen. I nodded once. I let you speak freely. My father's voice rose. You humiliated us. No, I said. You documented yourselves. Tamsin's eyes filled, not with tears, but with panic. This meeting is over, I said. For today. She leaned back, breath unsteady. You can't do this. I already did, I said. The screens behind me lit up with scheduled reviews and committee notes. Tamsin stared at them, then at me. You were watching, she said. I was listening. I replied. No one spoke after that. The power in the room had shifted without force, without anger. It had moved where it had always belonged. The silence broke with the sound of my phone vibrating against the table. Tamsin flinched. I glanced at the screen and placed the phone face down. The Ethics Committee has concluded its preliminary review. My father exhaled sharply. You're making this official. It always was, I said. Tamsin's voice trembled. This is personal. It's documented. I replied. She stood. You waited until now to do this. I waited until you finished speaking. I said. Susan clasped her hands together. Surely there's room for discussion. There is, I said. About standards. My father leaned forward. You're destroying her career. I shook my head. I'm refusing to attach my company to leadership behavior that fails review. Tamsin's voice cracked. Because of dinner, because of patterns, I said. Dinner confirmed them. My mother's eyes filled. We were trying to help. You were asserting control, I said. You just called it concern. Tamsin pressed her palms against the table. This partnership was critical. I know, I said, which is why it required scrutiny. She laughed once, sharp and brittle. So this is punishment. No, I said. It's pause. Indefinite. Susan whispered. What does that mean? It means no contract, I said. No public rejection, no announcement. Tamsin stared at the table. You're protecting yourself. I'm protecting my employees, I said. And my values. My father's voice softened. Dangerously. You could reconsider. I will, I said. If there is evidence of change? Tamsin looked up then, eyes rimmed with something raw. If you mattered, I wouldn't. The words hung there, exposed. My mother covered her mouth. My father closed his eyes. I didn't move. That fear has been shaping your choices for a long time. Tamsin's shoulders collapsed inward. I didn't know how to be anything else. I do, I said. And I expect it from people who lead. Susan spoke quietly. What happens now? You go back, I said. You examine how power shows up in your decisions. Tamsin shook her head. You're asking me to undo everything. No, I said. I'm asking you to build something different. My father stood slowly. You've made your point. I've drawn a line. I said. Tamsin looked at me. Something like recognition forming beneath the panic. You're not angry. No, I said. I'm finished explaining myself. She nodded once. Not in agreement. In understanding. The pause settled into the room, not as punishment, but as consequence. They didn't stay long after that. My father was the first to reach the door. He paused, hand on the frame, as if waiting for permission he had never learned how to ask for. You've changed, he said. I stopped negotiating. I replied. He nodded once and left. My mother lingered. I thought success would protect you. It taught me limits, I said. She reached for my arm, then stopped herself. I don't know how to fix this. I'm not asking you to. I said. Susan murmured something about time, about healing. I didn't respond. Time only matters when behavior changes. Tamsin was the last one standing in the room. I didn't see you, she said quietly. I was always here. I replied. She swallowed. I don't know what we are now. We're honest, I said. That's new. She nodded, then walked away without another word. The door closed behind them, and the room felt lighter, not emptier, just clearer. In the weeks that followed, the bookstore stayed busy. Students came in after class. Parents lingered during evening readings. A small literacy program we'd piloted quietly filled faster than expected. One afternoon, a volunteer asked, "Why do you keep this place so open? Because it reminds me who I'm accountable to," I said. The board approved funding for 2 new community initiatives. No press release, no announcements, just work. My phone buzzed once. Weeks later, a message from Tamsin. We're restructuring leadership training. It's uncomfortable. It's necessary. I typed back a single line. That's how change usually feels. If this story feels close to home, if you've ever been measured by someone else's scale, or reduced to a version that made others comfortable, you're not alone. Stories like this exist because silence is common, not because strength is rare. Before you move on, take a moment. Share this story with someone who might recognize themselves in it. Stay with us for more stories about family, boundaries, and the quiet decisions that change everything. I locked up the bookstore that night and turned off the lights one by one. The space didn't need to prove anything. Neither did I. What remained wasn't forgiveness or victory. It was clarity.